Alicia Couture. I am a school adjustment counselor here. I am in the counseling office, and I am the first office in the modulars as soon as you walk in, 140. So today we're going to do, this is a gist agenda. We'll move through some things faster than other things. So today we're going to review social emotional learning, SEL, and we're going to talk about what the definition is by CASEL, which is the Collaborative for Social Emotional Learning. Your peers all use SEL like you do every single day with your students in your classrooms. So a few of your peers are going to share out some of their lessons and how they use SEL within their classrooms. And then we're going to go into small groups so you guys can talk amongst each other on how you use SEL in your classrooms and with your students. Exit ticket at the end. We're just going to have you write on that index card any takeaways or any questions. And then at the very end of the day, Lisa Brown is going to give us a community activity. Questions? All right. So this is just a nice little quote about being kind, which is what NRHS stands for. We're kind to each other and to our students. And part of our core values is that every child matters, every child is unique, and every child deserves to be safe. Part of our strategic plan at NRHS, which I think carries us through to 2025, one of our goals is social emotional learning. And that goal says that we will facilitate students and adults' development of the skills needed to understand and manage emotions, set and achieve positive goals, feel and show empathy for others, establish and maintain positive relationships, and make responsible decisions. So as a piece of that, CASEL, if you haven't heard of it, is a phenomenal organization. They offer a ton of information and a lot of professional development all around social emotional learning and how we treat each other and students within the classroom, in the community, and how we can partner with families to support them.
So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Alicia. I just wanted to talk about some things I've seen in education which I'm not sure are the right routes, and some things that I strongly believe are the right routes. One is the social emotional learning of students is not a specialized event that happens at one place during the week on a Tuesday from 9 to 9:30 because we do some special worksheet. Schools, I think a lot of schools all over the country really made the mistake going back about 10 or 15 years ago and kind of force-fit this thing that there's something different about this. As a matter of fact, depending on your age, right, and many of us, however long we've been in this line of work, soft skills was the word that we learned when we were younger. And basically, those soft skills, some research has happened about those soft skills, the thinking behind why they're important, the value that they add, and then the psychological component and the research behind it has really clarified what SEL is. So if you go back and look at some of your training, with those of us who are a little older, think back to our own education, maybe even when we were in college, we're talking about what those soft skills are, and why they're important for the workplace, why are they important for the home, why are they important for relationships. I think this logic is just the good stuff that we do and what we model. And I just have a question or two that goes along with each of these to get us thinking about who we are. I think one of the things that makes NRHS special, and I think there are several things, I think we have a wildly high SEL IQ naturally as a staff. Just when you observe people in the cafeteria, at sporting events, the interactions when people are greeting their students at the door, or when they do a ticket to leave and someone gets a fist bump on the way out and they say, I like what you did today, you stepped up your game. Those are all examples of the logic that's embedded inside the simple CASEL wheel, which is what you hear referred to as when you see people commenting about it. So that's great. we can capitalize on that high SEL IQ that is brought here every day. And we don't need to do a million very different things outside of our classrooms, outside of our instruction, except for modeling these, right? I think we have a pretty good sense in terms of, are we self-aware? Do we know what we deliver? Do we know who we are and the impact we have on other people around us? By and large, around this campus, yeah, I think we really do. In terms of self-management, we can all climb the emotional ladder of frustration, but somehow we've got some governor inside ourselves that keeps us professional, engaging, polite, at least neutral, right? And not kind of dipping below that line. I also am really pleased, the numbers of you who have kept that above the line, below the line conversation going over the course of the year. That little 3-minute video certainly resonated because people catch each other. And you can goof on a little bit, I get it, but some people catch each other like, well, you're dipping below the line there. Well, those kinds of checks, like critical friend checks of who you're around at work, they say, wait a minute, you're starting to go. Well, that's really here, right? Where are you in terms of your self-management? Who you are, what you deliver, the impact on other people. Responsible decision-making, sure. Of course, we're doing that all the time. We're doing that out loud with our thinking in front of students all the time. We're doing that out loud with each other all the time. Your relationship skills, right? Students pick up on that very quickly, right? What kind of rapport, what kind of vibe, how you approach them, how you train them, and you can see how you're doing basically by watching them, because we know most students will mirror what we bring. So if you see, right, when you see that coming back at you, I think that's like give yourself a check plus, because you know that you're pushing that out. You're pushing out that energy that you want in the classroom and building relationships. And in terms of social awareness, going back to social awareness, do we reflect on what it is that we bring and the impact that we have, whether it's positive or neutral, hopefully all of it's there, or not so much in terms of the dynamic that we bring into the group. And do you have trusting relationships with people like really near you at the workplace who can say, oh, well, that didn't really go so well. Now already with Karen and Ho Yin, myself, John Matson, Joanne, Wendy, Chrissy, I think sometimes counselors move in and out, some of you guys move in and out, and people are pretty candid about that here, which I think is good. But we're diplomatic but candid. So when you need to share something with someone like, whoa, okay, were you really tuned in on how that was going to be received? And can we talk about that a little bit? So I think these are some of the natural goings-on that we do well around here. And I just want to see to it that we make sure that these core competencies around SEL stay part of the regular business of our work. When you separate it, you isolate it, you put it in a box, and you do it every Tuesday for a half an hour, it just becomes this afterthought. This is what you want your kids to have, I think. It's probably what you want your household to be based on. It's what we want to see at work. I don't think it's very complex. Some of the language and some of the psychology and the definitions become a little more complex, maybe even more complex than they need to be. But I think this just needs to be embedded in kind of the way we do school. Okay? In terms of the strength of who we are, we go back to the question of what's the highest yield thing that we can do to produce a quality school, be fulfilled with our work, and have students have great outcomes. I think the greatest thing that we can do is be this. Most days we'll be on. Some days we'll be off. We all have our lives, we all have our homes, we have all of that. But if people show up day in and day out thinking about how we can be and demonstrate this, I don't think there's a greater lever in moving a school forward in the form of our fulfillment with our work and student outcomes at the end. Right? I think it's that powerful. So it's great that we're spending the time talking about it today. It is part of our strategic plan. It's going to become part of our school improvement plan that's in development. It's certainly all going to be part of a vision to graduate statement that we're going to get motoring on a little bit more going forward. So this language is going to be at the core of a good amount of what we do. Okay? Any initial questions just about the basic definition or kind of the ideas thus far? What questions might you have? Ain't for nothing, but damn good teaching right there. Then. Great. Alicia, you're up. Thank you.
All right, so like Pat just said, SEL, today is just as a reminder that so we can be more intentional in our everyday practices in school and in your classroom. The 5 competencies, these are just life skills. These are the #1 life skills that businesses and corporations across the country want kids to have. Like when you leave school, they should be able to do this, right? And then they go to college, and as young adults, they should be getting better at it. But if the kids don't have these skills, how are they going to be employed? Also goes with growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. So growth mindset, you want to speak to your book? I saw you snuck it on there.
I didn't speak it on there, but I'm glad that you did. No, you have at it.
Well, I'm not familiar with the book,
Okay.
but that's a good read apparently.
So Carol Dweck basically put together a guidebook that covers much of what's on the wheel. And she's a Stanford psychologist, and this became kind of the #1 read around the country over like a 15-year period. It went like wildfire. And it basically was the simple idea of, are people showing up to work with a fixed mindset, or are they showing up to work or their home or their college dorm with a growth mindset? Like no matter where I am with my career, with my life, with my relationships, with whatever, tomorrow you can be a better mother or father than you are today. Tomorrow you can be a better neighbor than you are today. And that basic, very much Kaizen-like Japanese logic, you can, by the increment, you can be a little bit better tomorrow than you are today. Even if in your last month, day, or hour of your career. Even if it's the last day you're living in a particular neighborhood, you still have the opportunity to be most neighborly on the last day living there. And that kind of thinking spread and influenced all sorts of other writers after this. And if you read this genre, if this is some of what you read in terms of success-oriented literature, you know Grit came after this, Malcolm Gladwell went crazy, a lot of what Tim Ferriss wrote all really exploded from Carol Dweck's original research. So if you're going to pick one book up, I've done a faculty-wide read with this before, and people really appreciate it. So thank you for putting it in there.
Yeah, so we want our students really to have a growth mindset, right? We want them to embrace challenges, not to give up, practice some self-compassion, learn from criticism. We want them to be inspired by other peers' successes, right? We don't want them to avoid challenges or resent success of other people or criticize or judge others. So just those competencies moving forward with the growth mindset.
The essential skills for success in school, work, and life.
Social emotional learning centers their mind and body. It reduces their emotional tension so they can be open to new content and material. We find that academic outcomes increase exponentially when students are nurtured, loved, and cared for, that we get much more out of them when we first address social emotional needs. So for us, it's actually an academic intervention and not just an emotional one.
If we expect students to be college and career ready, it's important for us to focus on these skills and competencies: self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. Self-awareness is the ability to identify your emotions, to be able to tie thoughts and feelings to behaviors.
We find that self-awareness is one of the hardest things for young people, being aware of their own body space and the impact of their words and emotions on other people. So a lot of what we do is reflective through conflict mediation, through circles, through journaling, having them see their own internal world shift that or make a different choice next time.
Self-management is the ability to self-motivate, to have self-control, to regulate one's emotions.
In the classroom, that may be a breathing exercise, or that might be counting 5 or taking a break.
So with students who don't really know how to deal with their anger or don't really know how to resolve conflict, we're giving them a tool that helps them deal with it in a less stressful way.
Social awareness is about embracing diversity, showing empathy for others. Activities might include service learning projects, addressing social justice issues. Role-playing is a great opportunity for students to address how a person might have felt in a conflict on the playground.
We're going to see if other people have had some of the very same experiences around bullying that we've had.
You're in my boat if you have a bully now.
Well, it's still a lot of people.
Relationship skills are important in project-based learning. It's the ability to work cooperatively with someone, to resolve conflict.
It's the one skill you need your whole life. You may not need calculus tomorrow, but you have to know how to work a relationship, whether it's for a coworker or a life partner. You have to know how to handle conflict and how to handle challenges.
Sometimes at recess, Maya would come over and just start talking about us and saying mean things.
Is it your job to make today's job at school hard?
I know it's a form of bullying, and sometimes I will say sorry to her.
So you choose to be someone's ally and make their choice.
Responsible decision-making is considering the well-being for self and others. It's evaluating the consequences for various behaviors or actions. We do this through shared agreements, one-to-one problem solving, or having students debate an issue.
If you were like, hey, Sheeta, can I, how much does an egg cost in this class? And you took out your wallet, and I was like, $50 would work. Which one of us would be corrupt in that case?
You're the one that's asking for the money.
We're truly teaching these students to be productive citizens. We're teaching them life skills. We're teaching them how to problem solve effectively. We're teaching them how to be resilient.
When I think of all the billions of dollars we've spent on Title I and all these intervention programs, and when all is said and done, what do we have to show for it? I think we're trying to teach technical things instead of devoting some of the resources to teach who you are as a person. Once you know who you are, then learning becomes exciting because you've already established yourself.
It's important for teachers and principals to understand that it can't be a binder off the shelf. It can't be something that happens from 2:15 to 4:30 on Tuesdays and Thursdays. It has to be part of the school culture.
Giving teachers flexibility, giving them a range of skills, giving them different ways that it can look, and allowing them to take their own personality and match that to what they want in their classroom has been the best way to get authentic, true practice.
If we continue to do what we've always done, we're always going to get what we always got. Is that good enough? I don't think it's good enough for the 21st century. We need to be the outliers to try things that have never been tried and see if they work. What are we waiting for?
SEL, it does come in a box. You can buy it in a box and use it in a box. But really, SEL, it sounds like it's a curriculum. It's not. It's you. It's all of them. All of us, right? We work with kids every single day, intentionally helping them, supporting them, instructing them. So SEL is a universal intervention. It's universal. Everybody gets it. They get it when they get on the bus. So Mr. Allen is our first teacher who's going to share his lesson.
For for those of you who don't know me, my name is Tom Allen. I teach in the history department. I teach economics, psychology, and world history too. And I basically picked this up when we had our restorative practices PD at the middle school like 4 years ago. Do you guys remember that? Right, we're in a room and there's a big jovial guy and he told us that he used the 1 to 5 check-in with every class every day. And when COVID came around, I remembered that because I was looking for a way to connect with the students as we were all virtual, and I found that it really worked. And once we came back to school, I continued to do it because I found that it still really worked. And so I've been doing it probably for the past 2-3 years, basically since the beginning of COVID. And essentially what I do is at the beginning of every class, I dedicate about 10 minutes to do a check-in with the students. And the check-in is basically what you did when you walked in the door, where I asked them how they're doing from a 1 to a 5, 1 being the worst, 5 being the best. You don't really have to elaborate, but it gives them, some time for some self-awareness to kind of think about kind of where they're at that particular moment. And I write it down and I keep track of it. And so, if I see that a kid is having a 2-day for, consecutive days, then, maybe I'll take that student aside, right? And it kind of leads to, a conversation where we discuss basically a simple question that's a follow-up. So oftentimes I try to tie that question into the curriculum. I'll talk about, what's an economic decision that you made over the weekend or the last couple days. Or if we're talking about psychology, I'll try to tie it into, our consciousness unit. But oftentimes it's just a silly question, right? It's, if you could live in a fictional world, that was the question today, which fictional world do you live in? I would live in the Pokemon world, right? Or I just ask them about their weekend or what something they're looking forward to, something that happened to them that day that was positive. The question is less important than just kind of generating a basic discussion. And so, first there's a social emotional check-in, the mood 1 to 5. The key thing about the question is that it's a low stakes question that everybody can participate in. So you never want to ask too personal of a question or something they don't want to share about, but it gets everybody talking and kind of builds community. Like I said, it does take about 5 to 10 minutes, sometimes a little bit more per class, but I've had real benefits in terms of engagement with the students and the way the students kind of build relationships with each other and build relationships with me because I'm able to share a little bit about myself because I always answer the same question and I tell them how I'm doing for a 1 to 5. So you're able to kind of easily model that. So in terms of some of the benefits to learning, one thing that I found is beneficial is that each student in the class will be seen and heard every single day. So, it's sometimes hard to connect with students that are very shy, right? But if you kind of have this as part of your kind of paradigm that you hit every single day and they know what to expect, they feel a little more comfortable coming out of their shell, right? And sharing with the students around them. And the other benefit for that is that the other students get to kind of listen to the other students in their class, people they don't necessarily know, and understand their peers better. And I think it leads to lower levels of aggression and kind of more levels of mutual respect kind of throughout the classroom. And so in that sense, I think getting back to those 5 points, kind of relationship building and self-awareness are kind of the 2 main things that I'm kind of getting at with SEL. I never really thought too much about this until I was asked to kind of do this for the professional development, but it's always worked for me. One thing I learned about when I completed my master's degree last year was that it's important in the classroom to what they call reduce affective barriers, which basically means kind of bringing down the temperature in a classroom to promote learning. So when students are comfortable in a classroom, they're comfortable with their peers, with the teacher, they feel connected to the people around them, right? They're more willing to learn and they're more happy to learn, and it's just a better kind of learning environment. And the other thing about this is that I really do think it has brought greater kind of academic outcomes, right? I was initially kind of wary and thought this was kind of silly to do this at the beginning of class, but the students often tell me that it's their favorite part of class, right? And they get engaged because they're not immediately thrown directly into whatever we happen to be doing that day. So I'd be happy to answer any questions. That's just kind of my routine at the beginning of class. I'm going to keep doing it and really enjoy it. It's actually made better connections between myself and the students as well. Yes?
You welcome people in for the first couple minutes of class?
Anytime. Anytime, yeah.
You are located where?
All over the place. I'm in a building, in a different classroom for each class, but if anybody would like to observe me, at the beginning of every class, it's always going to be the same, so just reach out. alent@austinschools.org. Great, thank you very much.
Teacher is Jody Burchell.
That's kind of how I start my day. I was asked to provide lesson plans, and I'm thinking, what are my lesson plans going to show that illustrate that I embed SEL in a daily basis? Pretty much nothing. It's the objective for the day, how I learn, but I do include how I start my day. This says Ryan Burchell Campbell, by the way, but that's okay.
It's the next slide here.
I'm up here now. What you're looking at right now is a photograph of one of my anatomy classes. I picked this activity on purpose to help give them the opportunity to talk, laugh a little bit, talk about their families. I too, just like Tom, start every single class with a daily check-in. Mine's a little bit more, I don't stand at the door. I go to every single desk, to every single student, every single day. And at the beginning of the year, prior to, because I'm an emergency certified teacher in my second year. So I've had the unique opportunity for 29 plus years to be an ed assistant in a room and look at all the good, bad, and the ugly that we provide. And I think that's where I got my personal take on what really works with students and what might not work with students. Mutual respect is key. Not talking down to students, those kinds of things. But I found out that there was a lot of students that are living lives that we don't really know what's really going on with their lives. So I decided after COVID to make sure I checked in with these kids every day. And it does take time, like Tom said. So, perhaps AP pushing when you have to get through a certain amount, running a science elective, I think I have a little bit more flexibility in my schedule. So I think that that's something you might want to consider. But it creates an environment in the classroom where the students feel comfortable talking to you about pretty much anything. And I literally go to every single desk, and it's been like, how are you doing today? You having a good day? Sometimes I'll just walk to the desk and do one of these, or we thumbs up. Other days, if it's after something that's been somewhat critical in the news that might affect a student's well-being or emotional well-being, we'll have a brief conversation about that. I have discovered things about students in their home lives that some things I don't want to know, but I'm able to turn some of these kids over to guidance because they eventually feel really comfortable about having conversations. And if you talk to them every single day, you get really good at reading their body language, where a student will come up and you say, how are you doing today? And they're like, I'm good. Well, it's like, so you get a little lower, and it's like, can you look at me and tell me that you're doing really, really well? That was hard to do when we were wearing masks. It was really hard to effectively figure out if a kid's okay or not when all you could see was their eyes. I found it really useful in the class. The kids seem to really, really enjoy it. I get emails from them pretty much every time they're absent, wanting to make sure that they understand that they're not missing the class on purpose. So they're doing things that I haven't asked them for because they've become really self-aware and they've come to that place in their mind where they know they're part of the community of the classroom. I'm no better than them. It's not my room, it's their room. I just think there's a lot of things that we personally can do. And quite honestly, when you talk about SEL, we can talk about all the buzzwords. And I didn't know what half of them were until I walked in here today. Quite honestly, I'm not going to lie. I just think it's part of the fabric of how you treat people. Some people have that innate into the fabric of their being. Some people don't. I've always kind of just had that like mother, nana, older sister type of, that's kind of just how I roll. So for me, it happens very organically and naturally in the classroom because I really and truly do care about every student. Even the kids that I don't particularly care about, or I mean not care about, but care for. Care the ones when you walk in the room and you just hear in the back and they drop in the F-bomb and they don't do anything. Those kids. Those kids that don't want to necessarily participate, but those are the kids that I kind of lean to and give a little bit more of my attention because let's face it, students like that are looking for attention, they're looking for attention whether it's good or bad, they just want someone to pay attention to them. So generally those are the students, are the really, really quiet students. And some of them get upset that over time you're able to read them really, really well because you start to really get to know them very, very well. And so you can say, listen, I know you're telling me you're okay, but you're not telling me you're okay. And so I'm just going to kind of watch you. And if you want to talk, let's go out in the hallway, let's have a private conversation. And it's the gains in the classroom as far as that I have found in my brief tenure as actually being in charge of a classroom of teachers has really created a really kind, respectful, honest, and an environment of a lot of integrity. I'm finding next to no cheating. I put a lot of them, it's on them. You walk in the room, you are young adults. You are responsible for A, B, and C, and it's upon you to make sure that you behave in a certain fashion because we're all in this together. And I think the more you put on them when it comes to self-awareness, respect, integrity, honesty, all those kinds of things, they want to please themselves. And they're not doing it for me, they're doing it for themselves. I probably say once every other week, you're the one that has to look at yourself in the mirror every morning. Now, if you're going to cheat, you go right ahead. Would you like me to just give you an A right now? Because if that's what you're going to do, that's not how things really roll in real life. You're the one that has to go every single morning. Hopefully you brush your teeth every day and you're looking at yourself in the mirror. What do you see back? Do you like what you see? If you don't like what you see, you better do something about it. And just put it all on them. But honestly, the fabric of everybody's individual being when we talk about SEL is going to be different on how they interpret, how they treat people. This particular unit was a lesson in genetics, and there has been a little hubbub about ethnic bullying, differences in skin colors, difference in the way people look, different intelligence levels. I mean, there's all, let's face it, we know there's all kinds of bullying. It's not just about, are you straight, are you gay, are you black, are you white, are you rich, are you poor? I mean, those are all parts of it, but a lot of it is much more subliminal than that. So this particular activity that I did to wind up the genetics review was we create babies. And it doesn't matter if you're the male or the female because you're either the sperm or the egg. And so kids paired up, they had no idea what the activity was going to be until they paired up. So there are boys paired with boys, girls paired with bears. They had to flip a coin, who's going to be the egg, who's going to be the sperm. And then, not to give you a science lesson, but there's a lot of things involved with determining genetics and what your child might look like when they're born, and it's a flip of the coin. Some things it's like, black, white, some of them are multiple alleles where you're flipping the coin a bunch, but the kids engage in conversation about their families and what their family looks like, or things that they experienced in their lives because they might come from a mixed race family, they may be Asian, they may have severe learning disabilities, they may have really, really, really frizzy curly hair with a unibrow. These are the kinds of things that are genetically embedded in our appearances and the way we look. So what this ended up doing was, some of these kids are like, man, I didn't know that the fact that your ears are like Dumbo the elephant were genetic. Like, you didn't really have anything to do with that. Like, certain physical attributes that kids like to make fun about other people, when you put it in a framework of this is all a flip of the coin when it comes to genetics and we're making babies, it just kind of like enlightens them a little bit, and it was fun. They had to work together in teams, and they had to draw what their child looked like when it was done. They had to use colored pencils, so they had to actually take into account the color of the skin, the color of the hair, the color of the eyes, the shapes of the lips, the ears. I mean, there's so many things. It takes an entire period. They had to name their child. And that was really interesting too. So if you can see on all of their faces, if you're able to look closely, because quite frankly, back there I can't see very much on the board. But if you're looking here, there's not one child in this, one student in this entire picture that's not smiling. They love the activity, they learn something, it reinforces the lesson, but it also reinforces the fact that we're all different and we all come from different parents and we all have something to give to each other. So my big takeaway from SEL is kindness, respect, integrity, honesty, treat others the way you want to be treated, and it's going to come back to you tenfold.
Spanish. And what I'm hoping to do to end this for us is to give you a few tricks you can take with you. I think the most important thing to echo, well, one of the most important things, is that social emotional learning and or well-being, as I like to call it, is authentic and genuine. So we need things as teachers who are already overwhelmed and exhausted and drowning at times that we can actually real life apply right now without adding more work to our plates, right? So hopefully I can do some of those. The other piece is that your comfortability with social and emotional is going to depend on you as the individual. You have to determine and decide what you're okay with in your own classroom. And that's going to look different from my classroom to your classroom to your classroom to your classroom. So what you have to find for social emotional is what you feel comfortable doing so that it remains authentic and genuine with the students, because they are smart cookies and they can see right through you when you're just up there with a piece of paper trying to make it happen, right? Okay, so, I can't do it on there. So the number one thing I try to do, and hopefully successfully, if you ask some of my students about it, is to create the environment that's welcoming, comfortable, and a place where students can take risks. When you get to taking another language, which I'm sure most of you have in your life, it's a little scary to have to actually speak and say those words and make a mistake in front of other people that are your peers that are judging you 24/7. So our big goal in my classroom is to create that environment where everybody makes mistakes, including myself. And I emphasize, look at that. I've been speaking English for 36 years, and I mess up a word. Or I've been speaking Spanish for 25-ish, 22 something years, and look, I don't know every word. So it's a place for students to be comfortable and take their risks. And I start that in day one. I get to know them, I talk about myself, they talk about themselves. In areas that they're comfortable with, there's a lot of silliness that happens. If you ask any of my students, they'll be able to tell you through my own modeling and sharing that I'm single, but Big Poppy is my future husband. He just doesn't know it yet. And that I live off of coffee. So we have to personalize it. We have to show up for our students as humans, as individuals, because that's when they're going to connect with us. And we play games in English and Spanish to kind of break that a little bit, and that's how, a lot of times, how I start in this environment that we're creating. And again, just that genuine interest and investment in who they are as individuals. It's hot in here. Okay. So games that aren't even games. This is the first year that I had a student say to me, wait, is this a game or one of your games where, like, we're not actually gonna win? And I was like, oh, we figured it out. That you can really make anything a game. And I said, keep track of your points, keep track of your points. And they're like, okay. And then we move on to something else and I don't do anything with the points. But it lets them be kids. I think we so often forget that our high schoolers are still kids, and they need opportunities to be kids that can foster those harder things to be developed, like self-awareness, like making a hard choice, like communicating, respecting, etc. And we do a lot of learning through play. Yes, as a language teacher, I can put all of this in another language, but I firmly believe that you can do it too in all of your classes in English, because sometimes we do them in English. And the language lends itself to be able to do some of these things. But if you think about your daily class, and you have 5 minutes at the start where everybody's coming and going, figuring things out, bathroom, etc., you can plug something in. How about those last 5 minutes when the kids want to pack up and line up at the door, and then you're yelling at them to sit down? How about you play a game? There's opportunities that you can just stick it in without really changing your curriculum. I teach AP, and I do this. So there are ways that you can embed social and emotional in those little hidden pockets where you're not actually losing time. But what I will say is, you give a little to gain a lot from the kids. So I give a little here by listening to what's going on with them, and then I know full circle that when I'm asking them to do something really big for me, they know that I'm going to understand where they're at. So it's kind of a give and take there. Just check my notes. Oh, a big thing is changing it up. We do so many different things, and I think that's important with today's technology babies, that you have to be doing different things at different times to engage the students to keep them in the moment. And the last thing are my check-ins. So I do check-ins regularly with my kids, which a lot of people do, I'm sure. But I also do them when I know big things are happening, like when midterms are happening. I ask them their stress levels. What are they doing to prepare? What teachers have helped them get ready? Okay, what can you do to self-advocate to get that other teacher that maybe wasn't quite ready yet to bring you on board? And so they're frequent, they're informal, sometimes they're formal. I put them right at the end of an exam that just says, hey, how'd you feel about this? Did you study? And they're so honest when you create this environment. So then we can go back and say, okay, well, you didn't study, so maybe like, how could we fix that? Because that's a really big part. And they're not afraid, there's not like a fear of, oh, I'm gonna be mad. It's more about how can I help you improve and grow. And again, I actually surveyed my kids this week knowing that I was doing this presentation to kind of see where they were at. And almost every single one of them said that these regular check-ins is the #1 thing that they like because they know that I genuinely care. I want to know where they're at. And the last bit that we don't always do as adults is I pause, I gauge the room, and sometimes I change my deadlines if they have 5 tests on Friday. Or if there's 3 huge projects for X, Y, and Z. And I think it's real easy to get in our structured, I have to make this deadline, I have to hit this curriculum box, I have to blah, blah, blah. But we have kids in front of us, and so we have to remember it's okay to have a little bit of flexibility and shift and wiggle and listen to what their needs are, because if you do that, the product you're going to get in the end is probably going to be better than what they were going to have that night to get it into you on time. Or how many of us have had kids not show up for a class and you think to yourself, wow, I would have much rather had that kid sitting in the chair to not miss what we did today than have them turn in the project that they're at home doing right now. So it creates an opportunity for students to communicate what's going on in their lives. Take the time and listen and ask and genuinely reflect and adjust. And the last thing I'll say is, for me, social and emotional is about being a human, because we're all human, we all have it going on in our lives, whether we know it or not, whether we know about each other or not what's going on. So for me, social and emotional learning isn't a box to check, but rather opportunities for modeling and teaching for students to learn for themselves, advocacy, boundaries, prioritizing mental health, and their overall well-being.
They need specific instruction, they need someone to support them and try to help them work through their problems and maybe even identify feelings. But if you have teenagers, you know as a parent, most of your teenagers, you can correct me if I'm wrong, probably spend a lot of time in their rooms. So the most adult interaction all of these teenagers have is here with you. My son spends more time with you all than he spends with me. And that's just a fact. He's with his friends, he has his stuff that goes to the gym, and he is here at school, and then he's in his room. So the skills that I developed, because as a parent, that's what you do with your kids right away is SEL development, right? It starts at home. But when they're teenagers, they need a lot more support. We were going to get into groups, but I don't think we have enough time for that. So maybe take 2 minutes and talk in turn to someone at your table or someone behind you at the table, and just say, maybe things that you do in your lesson plans that have something to do with some social emotional learning that you're here to talk about today.